Morning, everyone. It is Sunday. Some of you might be going to church. Some of you might get ready to fire up. But no matter where you are, it's time to jump into the rotation. Ladies and gentlemen, non binary viewers, I am your executive director, Christopher Kano. It is a pleasure to be joining you this morning. And of course, as always, our amazing deputy director, holding it down in Ybor City, also running it as our show's producer and engineer, Carlos Ermita. Carlos, how you doing this morning, brother?
Hi, how you doing? There we go. That's a much more suitable applause sound. There we go.
Oh man. Well, look, we're we've had a wild month. October was a lot of fun. There's been a lot of ups and downs with the campaign season, but everything is drawing to a close this week. Tuesday is election day. Today is souls to the polls, so folks are getting out of church and going to vote, and so they may not know, exactly what's on the line. But I know what's on the line. You know what's on the line. For those who are politically active, they understand that the future of this country, and in particular, an issue important to all of us, the legalization of cannabis is on the line. Because if there's a change in power at the federal level, we are most likely not going to see any movement on cannabis legalization. And that is just a shame, because we've seen so much great movement in the past 2 years with the passage of the MORE Act, with the introduction of the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act in the Senate, as well as President Biden, who was once someone who was behind the three strikes laws and in the '94 crime bill, actually changing his stance and pardoning and in addressing the records of folks who have federal marijuana charges. Now, there's a lot of criticism behind President Biden in his action. People say, oh, well, there's no one in federal prison for simple possession. But there are over 6,500 people in the D.C. area who have gotten, cannabis charges, that this does help. These are folks who will now be able to get jobs. These are folks who will now be able to apply for apartments. And so, going out and voting is vitally important. We are a nonpartisan organization. But I want people to understand is that we are going to support the candidates that support us, that support patients, that support caregivers, that support our families. And there are people who are going to support us having the right to self-determine and make the decision to be a medical marijuana patient between ourselves and our doctors, and not the politicians. And I think that's a big issue that going into this election, we should talk about. But, Carlos, you have not always been a politically active person as I've known over the years, but over the time of this show in the past year, I've seen you take a bigger interest in it. How are you feeling about this upcoming election?
I'm scared. No, especially for Florida, man, because it seems, we're a nonpartisan organization, yeah, but I mean, I've definitely seen what our Republican ran Florida government has done with the cannabis industry that we voted in, and it hasn't been good.
No.
The system has been closed off. Patients are spending up the ass about it. It hasn't been good at all. And quite honestly, politics is business, man. That's all it is. A political campaign is a business to get the man elected, and Ron DeSantis has the most funding. He's got the biggest pockets. What his regime, I would say, has done to our political system here in Florida has made it impossible for Democrats to really win in their districts. It's made it impossible for Gary's here. It's made it impossible for he's a black box. There he is. It's made it impossible for real change to happen, man. It's impossible to get an amendment initiative passed. You really need funding for that. And money talks. And right now, the Democrats don't have a lot of money in Florida. It seems to me that Republicans are going to win across the board. We're going to spend a couple more years under this strict and repressive medical marijuana system. and that's it. We've got to start focusing on getting amendment initiatives passed, I think.
You're right. I mean, what we've seen under the Florida GOP and DeSantis' administration, there was a big effort to restrict how we can even get constitutional amendments on the ballot. You know, they wanted to increase the voting threshold. They've made it very difficult to hire, paid petitioners. All for the sake of accountability and election integrity. DeSantis even created this election integrity task force, which is supposed to prevent voter fraud. But all he's doing is targeting people who were former felons who had their rights restored under Amendment 4. And he's looking for any loophole or some reason to intimidate them, arrest them. And it's a shame. And the sad part about it is that there was more voter fraud coming out of the villages, which is a heavily Trump-supported area, than there was in Miami-Dade or Hillsborough County or St. Pete or any of the places where we've seen DeSantis attempting to crack down with his election Gestapo.
Gary, I just kind of I think when we're talking about the mess that is Florida's system right now as far as voting is concerned, it is a mess. However, I should say that where is it? I voted. I got my early voting in, and I'm not going to say who I voted for, but suffice to say the hellfire will rain down.
I haven't voted yet, and I've got the reputation of being the least politically active guy here. You guys, I lean on you guys to tell me who to vote for and tell me what's going on politically. What the hell should I do?
That's a good question, Carlos. Let's talk and start with the top of the ballot. We have an interesting matchup with Governor Ron DeSantis versus former governor and current Congressman Charlie Crist. Charlie Crist comes with, the baggage that we all recall with his time as Attorney General and his time as a Republican governor in the state. But, times have changed, if you will. What was once, a conservative governor in Charlie Crist now seems in a lot of ways to be liberal on the side of the aisle because of the way the Republicans have taken certain stances on the culture wars. But all in all, Charlie Crist has come on this show more than once. He has committed to saying, that if you can brew your own beer in the state of Florida, you should be able to grow your own cannabis. That is the antithesis of what Ron DeSantis has said, in that he doesn't want us to have our own cannabis because he can't stand the funky smell.
Yeah. And the other thing about DeSantis and his crew on the right side is they feel that they are still involved in the Cole memo. They feel they have to have a robust regulatory system in place in order for us to have this item in the first place. And when it comes to home grow, it's very difficult to regulate. The whole concept of home grow is the fact that it's unregulated. That you can actually grow your own in your home without having anybody come over here and go to your house and do an inspection to make certain you're properly cultivating and things of that sort. But they can't do that. Not in the way that other states have done it, like where Michigan has said you can just grow 12 plants on your own. The problem with the folks over Tallahassee is they're saying, but if you do that, they're going to start growing for the neighborhood. They're going to start passing it out on Halloween. Everybody's going to get an eighth bag. Awesome. That is their attitude. They call that the gray market or misdistribution. Let's put it that way.
I just want to say that I am very disappointed in how much Nancy Reagan and her ilk told me growing up that I would be getting free drugs from people. It was just a bold-faced lie. I mean, I'm mad that the Ninja Turtles lied to me. Michelangelo came on TV one day and told me that I would get free weed from people, and that's just never materialized.
That must have been when you were microdosing a little too much.
No, this was when I was a child, Gary. I was like 9, 10 years old, and the Reagan administration and the Bush administration co-opted the Ninja Turtles into the Just Say No campaign. And so Nancy Reagan got, my favorite cartoon characters to try and scare me in the fact that I was going to be offered free drugs, every day at middle school.
I mean, we do have DoorDash type delivery directly from legal MMTCs right now. it'd be great if we could possibly get a delivery system that would allow us to do more than just one dispensary at a time. So if we wanted to get this delivery from various dispensaries, we could just have it all brought to us at one time. But that would involve more regulation that they're more than ready to do, but the MMTCs are not. And so obviously we have to come to terms with the politicians we have. And the politicians we have are based on who we vote for. And you can't go based on how people were 10 years ago. I mean, when DeSantis first came on, he even said, we're going to get rid of those cartels. And if you were listening to him and you believed him, then you'd assume that we weren't going to have the system that we still have right now. That is still controlling the entire cannabis industry here in the state of Florida. 22 licenses, 15 of which are active, 1 or 2 of which seem to take over the entire industry in the state of Florida, and that is not the free market.
Oh, Gary, we have our Pickford license. That would make it 23, right? But the interesting thing I read the other day.
We don't have that either.
Okay. The interesting thing I read the other day is that based on the way the legislature wrote the implementation, every 100,000 patients, they were supposed to dish out 5 more licenses. We're currently 22 licenses behind. We should actually have 45 licenses in this state right now at a minimum. So when you talk about free market economics and capitalism, the Florida GOP act more, like third world, warlords than anything. They're not supporting the free market. They're not doing what they need to do. The DeSantis administration has an inept bureaucracy. The Office of Medical Marijuana Use has changed heads, a couple times during his tenure. All in all, Ron DeSantis has done jack shit to improve the lives of medical marijuana patients. The most he can point to is several years ago when he got up and said we were going to make smokable flower a thing. I don't even know why that was an issue. That should have been out from Jump Street. But, that's his party in their poor implementation of what the voters wanted in this amendment. I'm more akin to identify with what Joe Redner's constitutional argument was, is that the amendment said the entire plant. So that means by nature, that amendment says that I should have access and be able to grow my own and be able to juice it, be able to use the roots, the leaves, all of that. You shouldn't be dependent on an MMTC's products, which we've seen over the past 4 years. We've had corruption in lab testing. We've had MMTCs having to recall products because there's mold, pesticides, microplastics. Corporate booth is a real thing, people, and it is not cool. It is not good for sick people to be smoking that bullshit.
And again, words matter. We were in Tallahassee saying, don't just call it smokable flower, call it whole flower, because we do more with it than just throw it into a pipe and smoke it. And that actually opened up the realms of them saying, well, smoking itself is bad for you because you inhale all these hydrocarbons from the plant matter and yada, 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 yada. And I said, well, in that case, let's talk about whole flower, because people do take the flower and they grab their magic butter machine and they make edibles with it or whatever else they want to do with it at home. The whole point is it's theirs to do with as they wish, which is actually true. But it's
Gary, let me go ahead and knock down that claim about the smoking being bad for you. This week in the Israeli journal Rabam Maimonides. Maimonides, thank you. My Greek and my Hebrew aren't up to par. But it showed that the inhalation of THC dominant cannabis flower long-term safely mitigates the symptom of chronic lower back pain and is much more effective than the use of CBD dominant extracts.
That's right, because the mucosa in the lungs is much more amenable to to absorbing the smoke and therefore getting it to your body that much faster. It'll be easier towards the blood-brain barrier, so to speak, as opposed to edibles where it has to go through the stomach, get metabolized in the liver, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, and be honest with you, there have been studies that have actually shown that smoking cannabis actually decreases bronchospasms and makes it easier for asthmatics to breathe, which I'm well aware of, because that's one of the situations that I've been stuck in, because I got burned by paraquat back in the 1980s that I had some lung damage. So,
Well, when it comes to moving forward on adult use, the thing that the Republicans and conservatives in general, when they bring up their expert witnesses, always want to cry is, what about the children? What about the kids? They're going to put marijuana in the Halloween candy. Oh, kids will have more access to it. And I just want to put a stop to that bullshit right now, because according to data published in the Journal of Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research, the enactment of state level laws legalizing marijuana for adults does not influence early adolescents' attitudes towards its potential risk.
It doesn't. It all has to do with the marketing. I mean, tobacco companies targeted youth because they needed replacement smokers, because they knew that people were dying in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And so therefore, if they get them hooked when they're in their teens, therefore they have a large supply of customers ad nauseum. And that just is not happening with cannabis. We are not marketing to kids. If they put cannabis into a gummy bear, it's not because we're trying to force it into a kid's throat.
No, it's because millennials grew up eating Flintstone gummies, and now we're in our 40s.
That's exactly right. And it's good to see that you had all those great vitamins in you. I see you.
Yes, I'm quite healthy over here.
There you go. And we also had high fructose corn syrup to beef us up too. We've always very healthy in the United States and always will be, but we are trying to actually do something to make people healthier. That is why we're supposedly have a medical program here in the state of Florida. And somebody told me the other day, we don't have a medical program. We have a veiled medical program that is actually more recreational. And of course, I don't even like to use the word recreational, because they use the word recreational for heroin use too. And
well, Gary, I want to harp on that for a second, because if we really had a recreationally slanted program, we'd be more like Washington, D.C. In the District of Columbia, Mayor Muriel Bowser has signed legislation which increased cannabis possession limits for authorized patients and permits non-residents to access the city's medical marijuana dispensaries by identifying as having to need medical marijuana without a doctor's recommendation. And temporary non-resident, ID cards are valid for 30 days at their dispensaries. So, I mean, she's taken some of the good things that you've written in your reciprocity and eliminated the middleman by not having, people have to spend $300 on a doctor's recommendation.
Yeah, well, one thing I also need to mention is the fact that a lot of people say, well, we have this law in this state, we have that law in that state, so we should replicate it exactly the same over here in Florida, and then we'll have exactly what they have. It doesn't work that way. Oklahoma actually has a law which says whatever a doctor will approve is fine with them, as far as a cannabis license is concerned, to have medical cannabis. But that's not going to happen in the state of Florida. It was built from the ground up, always putting the doctor in the hot seat, so to speak, as far as what condition you have. And then they threw the Board of Medicine on top, saying that, which is a bunch of politically based doctors who are deciding whether or not your doctor's recommendation was valid or not. And that is inserting somebody else between you and your doctor, who's not even there, who doesn't know you, who doesn't know anything about your history, but who's going basically off of gross statistics in this state, deciding whether or not they're putting out too many recommendations for pain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in the state of Florida, what I decided to do was put through a bill that would increase the number of qualifying conditions. I added another 35 that are popular and have been used across the country, so that doctors wouldn't have to use any mental gymnastics to give you your medical card. Wouldn't have to say, well, your illness looks something like this one that's actually one of the 10 that we have, and so therefore we're going to do it, just so they can get scrutinized by the Board of Medicine, the Board of Osteopathic Medicine. It doesn't make any sense. Let's give the doctors a break. Let's extend the number of qualifying conditions that are out there, so that it's so much easier for you to get a card, and less hot seat for them.
No, Gary, I think you're absolutely right. There needs So, I've spoken with National Normal about this, and one of the things they did in Virginia with their normal chapters, they put forward legislation that essentially has eliminated all the qualifying conditions and not have a qualifier. Just if a doctor recommends it, it is what it is, right? Like that's the qualifying condition. Your doctor says you need it. And I think that makes sense because, we're seeing conditions that are helped by cannabis that people may not realize. Like, for example, in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, most recently, hepatitis C virus infected patients who consume cannabis have been found less likely than non-users to suffer either hypertension or other metabolic disorders. And so, they took a cohort of over 6,000 people infected with hepatitis C in France, and they were able to find that, they had fewer metabolic disorders like obesity, diabetes, hypertension than those people who had no history of cannabis consumption. And so, Hep C isn't on our list, is it?
No, it's not.
No.
Neither is autism, which really should be.
Autism. Yes, exactly.
And sickle cell anemia, which should be.
What about Tourette syndrome?
Yeah, that's right. It's not on there.
Exactly. It's nuts. It's nuts.
It goes under that
Why the fuck is
of a like or similar nature.
I know, Carlos, right? Why the fuck?
But like the fact that we have that clause that's like anything that a doctor deems a debilitating medical condition, doesn't that leave it pretty open though? Like, I mean, do we need to like get rid of all of those qualifiers? Like, if a doctor deems autism to be debilitating, then the doctor can recommend that, right?
Well, we don't have that exactly in those words. What it says is that you should have a condition that's like or similar to one of the other delineated conditions out there. So it has to look kind of like PTSD if you have chronic anxiety or chronic depression, which are not the same thing.
No,
because chronic anxiety and chronic depression do not need a trigger, whereas PTSD is a trigger phenomenon.
And it's confusing me too, because you were saying earlier, I mean, I think I just jumped in, but like you were saying earlier that people are saying that our system's a lot like just a recreational based system, but you have to have all of these qualifying conditions. I pay for some of my employees medical recommendations. I pay for them to go see the doctor and whatnot. And the truth is that it's difficult to find a doctor that's willing to diagnose a condition as debilitating. They have to have a pre-diagnosed condition, right? Like it's kind of like a safety net that these doctors use.
Yeah.
Where
they want to have another doctor have already signed off on it, right?
Yeah, this doctor said it was debilitating. I'm just the guy that can recommend the marijuana.
Yeah.
Well, when I say that we have a veiled medical program, what I mean basically is that once you leave that doctor's office, once you've gotten your recommendation, the program looks less and less medical. I'll give you a very quick example. Went into a dispensary. I'm not going to say which one. Well, what the hell? No, I'm not going to blame Move for this one. But I went in there and I was just basically getting some of my own, and somebody else next to me was saying, this strain right here, is it good for migraines? And what the ladies behind the counter said, I got to tell you, this will knock you off your ass. I don't think that was the question. I don't think the woman asked what here will prevent me from sitting down properly.
I understand your concern there, Gary, but like, what if that strain specifically, like it could have been that bud tender is warning this person, hey, that's not for headaches, that's knock you on your ass shit, right? The headache weed's over here. Was that like anything? Did you feel that was going on at all?
No, she was promoting it as a positive. She was saying, if you this stuff is great, it'll make you feel so cool. This thing is great. This will knock you off your ass. This is great. This will make you think creatively all day. And the woman was saying, I have migraines. These are things that I get an aura, lets me know it's coming on, and then I'm gone for the next 24 hours where I can't handle light or sound, and I have to put a towel over my head, and I can't work, I can't sleep, I can't do anything. This is what I'm trying to deal with. I'm not trying to find out what will knock me off my ass at a party. That's basically it. And that's why I say we have a veiled medical program. We don't have very many bud tenders who even really understand the concept of what the receptors do. And by the way, I have to say this: happy 92nd birthday, Raphael Meshulam, who just had his birthday yesterday.
Hey, happy birthday to Dr. Meshulam. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Meshulam is actually the scientist from Hebrew University that discovered and isolated THC, CBD, and contributed to discovering the endocannabinoid system. Most people don't realize, but the vast majority of research that we've had on the medicinal uses of cannabis has come out of Israel and has not even really been fully explored or discovered until the 90s. So, in a lot of ways, right now, we're on the cutting edge of research in this country and in our states. Especially with the federal government still not fully descheduling and decriminalizing. So, in a lot of ways, if you're a medical marijuana patient, you're a pioneer in medical research right now.
That's right.
I'm a pioneer, man.
The cutting edge.
Well, it kind of sucks, man, because like the whole point of this episode is to talk about what's going on voting wise, and it just feels like we're gonna stay stuck in time for the next couple of years, man. And yeah, I don't know how else to put it. Like it doesn't look like we're going to vote any type of we're going to be able to get any type of amendment initiative passed anytime soon.
Well,
and it doesn't look like we're going to have any friendly legislators in here in Florida. Like the only hope is possibly some sort of like federal legalization thing going on.
Well, Carlos,
Brandon said a couple weeks ago, rather, and he basically said they're not interested in doing any kind of cannabis legislation this upcoming session. You're not going to see anything of it as far as he can see, and he has been one of our champions and been there in the fray, so to speak.
Yeah, he wouldn't lie.
And now he's termed out of office, so we're definitely. You're right, Carlos. When looking for allies, it's going to be difficult. And then even then, the allies that we currently have, in a lot of ways, people like Carlos Guillermo Smith, who's always been there for us. Anna Eskamani, they're even being challenged. In their what you would think safe districts. And so there's no guarantees that we'll see some of the same people in the legislature. I mean, Andrew Learned is another ally that we've had that is currently in a contested race. But all in all, when we're talking about races, DeSantis versus Chris, I got to give the vote to Chris. And then looking further down the ballot, we're looking, or rather at the top is United States Senator. And Marco Rubio doesn't even send nice emails when you try to email him about an issue about cannabis, whether it's, you're asking him to support this piece of legislation or you're asking him to come on board with this issue within the cannabis caucus in Congress. And he is just a flat out prohibitionist. He's a product, he's a Reagan baby, if you will. He really believes that just say no bullshit and all the talking points that come with it. He probably still has his Dare t-shirt, under his shirt and tie. And that's not the person we need. Val Demings, in her time in Congress, I know that's the ironic thing, right? For a lot of people, it's like, wait, you want me to vote for the police? You want me to vote for the police chief? And let's just be real. Yes, Val Demings was a police chief of Orlando. However, in her time in Congress, she's voted for the MORAC twice. So, when it came down to the votes, she voted where it needed to be. And Marco Rubio has done jack shit to help us advance this. He's still a prohibitionist. So, if we could get at least one non-prohibitionist senator up in Congress, then I think that would go a long way. So vote has to go to Val Demings on that one.
All right, now I need to preempt almost all of our conversations in regards to voting this year. A little bit about polls. Now, you see a lot of these polls out there saying, Demings is down by 5, then she was up by 2, and Chris was up by 7, now he's down by 7. Let's be certain about what polls are and what polls are not. They are a snapshot made by a sampling of individuals. It is not everybody's vote put together. It's basically a bunch of people who they've asked who may or may not be likely voters, and they may actually skew the sampling to be more right-wing than left-wing. And so polls are never meant to be a forecast of who is going to win. It is strictly a snapshot of a certain number of individuals that were picked by the poller to go ahead and find out what their ideas were at that point in time. And you can take it as that, as just, you go to somebody's house and you ask a couple questions and you'll get the answers of the people in that house. It may not be necessarily the responses you'd get every single where you go, but it's that house.
No, you're right, Gary. One of the things I recall in my master's program was them, making sure that you have the proper sample size and that you're also making sure you're not geographically locking in one area. We know that Florida tends to be islands of blue and swaths of red based on voter registration. So you have these islands like Tampa, St. Pete, Miami, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, if you will, Tallahassee. But then the rest, the country areas, the areas you're driving to get to those places, whether it's Sebring or Polk County or outside of Gainesville, Marion County and such, those areas are red. If you call houses just in those red areas, then you're going to be able to get a poll that shows that DeSantis is kicking ass. If you just poll people in the Tampa urban corridor, you're going to be able to get a poll that shows that Chris is leading. And we see that every single time. You're right. It's not an actual snapshot of the state. In fact, we won't actually know until probably 9, 10 o'clock, maybe even later on election day, depending on how close the race is, if there's a winner. Ron DeSantis only won against Andrew Gillum by 0.4%. And so if you think about all the things that Gillum had going for him versus, Chris, one of the things I recall knocking on doors, even among traditional Democrat voting houses in the last election in 2018, was that they weren't voting for Gillum because he was black. And that's just an honest part of Florida politics that need to be addressed. Now you got Charlie Crist running up against DeSantis. You got two white guys going at it. It's going to be a probably even a closer toss-up. Now, what the X factor in all of this is the flight out of other states to Florida, and it's the conservative flight out of California, out of New York, because Florida doesn't have an income tax. And so moving to Florida, as a tax haven is definitely something we've seen over the years, and that Florida also, the real estate boom. So there are hundreds of thousands of conservatives that have moved into this state, and that could swing the election as well.
And so we have to deal with the fact that there are polls out there that are actually almost meant. I haven't even gotten into push polls, but that's another thing altogether. That's where they have leading questions. They ask you questions in a way that you would answer it. Do you want to see your children turn into drug addicts, or would you prefer to see cannabis made illegal completely?
Yeah, those polls where you could tell that there's an inherent bias in how they're asking the questions.
Exactly, and I've been dealing with them for months now. Every time I see a call from an unknown source, I just don't bother answering it, because most of them have been push polls lately. So why even bother?
We live in an era where, people don't pick up the phones for numbers they don't recognize. I'm the same way. I have thousands and thousands of numbers programmed in my phone. If you're not in my phone, you're probably either a spammer or, it's maybe a first-time call that's unclose normal. But, typically I don't pick up numbers I don't recognize. And so in that, texting has become a big thing too. I get polls via text now all the time. They'll text me a poll. Hey, we want your opinion on this. And then I'm reading through the polls and I'm like, this poll was horribly constructed. Y'all are looking for a certain outcome. And so polling companies in themselves are selling a product to these politicians that have a whole bunch of money on hand. And so you got to understand that if you're going to trust the polls, understanding that they're charlatans in a lot of ways too, and that they're just trying to get off on the fact that we have all this money in our political system. And if you want to make money in politics, start a polling company and sell polls to candidates to tell them what they want to hear.
And they mentioned the Fabrizio polls yesterday in regards to DeSantis saying how far ahead he was. Well, Fabrizio is a friend of DeSantis. Fabrizio basically set up polls to make Trump poll numbers look higher in Florida. Yeah. And so what do you expect? You get what you pay for.
Well, the division in our country is so tight, right? Like 48% of people are always going to vote Democrat. 48% of people are always going to vote Republican. It's that small 2% of voters that people want to get to. And a lot of times they're non-party affiliated voters. It's not like they're Democrats who are going to vote Republican and Republicans who are going to vote Democrats. They're those folks who say, well, I vote for the candidate, not the party. And so they'll hype up poll numbers because groupthink is a real thing in this country. People want to vote for a winner. And oftentimes people will, if you can intimidate someone enough to get them to believe like, oh, I'm voting for that person, throwing your vote away, I want to vote for a winner. I mean, that's just, it's a dopamine release in a lot of ways. People feel good about voting for a winner. That's just America. We love winners. You know, if you ever seen the movie Patton, in the beginning, General Patton's giving this monologue, and he's like, America loves a winner. It will not tolerate a loser. Because losing is hateful to us, and that's also why the big lie is so popular in this country, and the fact that people think that the last election in 2020 was rigged because there were so many people who found it distasteful that they backed a con artist like Donald Trump and they lost. In 2016, a lot of those folks were disaffected. I mean, I was a disaffected voter in 2016 when Bernie Sanders was screwed out of the primary, when the Democrats rigged the primary against Bernie. I was one of those people who's like, what do I do now? Do I vote for someone, who was a union buster while they were on the board of Walmart, who's been a hawk when it comes to foreign policy, who takes money from all the wrong people, who happens to be a member of my party? Or do I vote for this guy who's stirring up xenophobic and racist sentiments among the worst parts of our country? And it's like, God, it's like a choice between a douche and a turd sandwich. It's a choice between, Darth Vader and the devil. It's crazy.
It is. And when you get a lot of people who are very disinterested and disenchanted and say, we need to have a 3 or 4 party system. And they end up voting for Lyndon LaRouche, which is what I did during college.
Well, I find it interesting in that Australia has one of those multi-party systems, but also has compulsory voting. If you don't vote in Australia, you get a ticket. Now, that's not a very American thing. For us, we're all about freedom. So, but thinking about the fact that they have 96% turnout, Oregon is a unique state in that everybody in that state gets a vote by mail ballot. There's no in-person voting locations. Like you vote by mail, everybody votes by mail in that state. And so that helps turn out, as long as you turn in your ballot, you're getting your votes counted. And but in Florida, we've always been the Wild West. I mean, stuffing ballot boxes, in Florida has always been an issue. You have the people in South Florida that go around and try and collect ballots. That's always been an issue. And you look at the machines that we had in the 19th century, like Tamiami Hall, in such in the Boss Tweeds and such, so you give it a quick history lesson to folks, but election in this country have always been a little iffy. I mean, if you look back during the Civil War, President Lincoln wasn't even on the ballot in certain states, during his reelection during the middle of the war. So, the fact that we have some of the safest elections, and yet there's still this red herring, this boogeyman out there of election fraud is absolutely, ludicrous in many ways. I mean, you can count on maybe one hand how many actual issues of election fraud there are in our state. And the fact that DeSantis is wasting our money, trying to crack down on a non-existent issue. It's sad. And Mark, I really don't give a damn if my rant is boring. You can suck it, and so can DeSantis and all of his cronies. The fact is that legal cannabis has been ranked again in 2021, cultivated cannabis for state legal adult use, at $5 billion, more than $5 billion, making it this nation's 6th most valuable crop. And so only corn, soybeans, hay, wheat, and cotton bring in more money than cannabis. And in 3 states, Alaska, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, cannabis grown for the legal marketplace is the single most valuable crop. So the fact that we have a government that is not on board with making money, especially in a time where we can definitely be making money and generating tax revenues from this, is sad. And I think one of the issues that we continue to have is Well, we don't need to tax this back into the legacy market, and that's one of the issues that we have in California. Florida is so far away from becoming California, so I want folks to realize that as well. But all in all, when in a recent study, according to data in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs, consumer decisions on whether to purchase cannabis products from the legal market or the unregulated market are influenced primarily by price and convenience. Canadian researchers surveyed more than 11,000 marijuana consumers in the US and Canada, and people said they're more likely to forego accessing marijuana from the legal marketplace if they believe they can obtain a cheaper product more conveniently from unregulated sources.
Which is important. Make sure you know your plug, because there are guys out there, I hate to rank on this for even just a second, but who sell fentanyl along with cannabis, and sometimes the fentanyl is in the air when they're packing up the cannabis, and it may get actually into that stuff. So know the guys you're dealing with, and of course, if you have an MMTC that has a decent strain that you have access to, wonderful. That's what we're working towards. We're hoping to get, and we still have to continue to evolve our market to make things happen. Somebody also mentioned the Electoral College. Outside of the presidential election, doesn't make any difference. But yeah, we need to get rid of the Electoral College, because it was made by landowners who wanted to maintain the vote, who didn't believe that the individual voter really was smart enough to make their own choice, and so therefore they were going to make it for them.
Dude, screw college.
Well, Gary, also to point to historical facts is that the Electoral College was also a way to give the smaller slave-owning states more representation in electoral politics than the larger northern ones like New York and such.
Well, that was basically, especially in the Senate. That's exact. It was the great equalizer, as it was called at that point in time. We needed to discuss who is on the ballot locally, because people are going to be voting, if they haven't already, over the next 2 days. And and Tuesday is coming up very, very fast.
And real quick, we had some people talk about ranked choice voting. In Alaska, they recently tried this out with ranked choice voting. And I thought that was interesting, is that, you pick 3 candidates. If your first candidate doesn't get it, then your votes go to the second choice that you have, and then down to the third if that second person doesn't win. So, that's the interesting thing. But for me, I think the biggest thing that could help change the landscape of our elections is if we had primary runoffs in our state. Because you can win a primary without a majority of the vote. If there's 6 people running in the party primary, you really only need 16% of the vote to win. Everybody else gets 15 and you get 16, you win. It's a winner take all primary. If we had primary runoffs that required someone to get 50% or more, a simple majority of the votes, that would change things tremendously. We would actually see more wheeling and dealing. We would see more compromise. We would see more people, actually going to the center rather than running to this hyper-partisaness that we have in this country, where nothing is getting done in Congress. And so we really need to make a change. But all in all, the candidates that we have on the ballot are the candidates that we have. And so between DeSantis and Chris, votes got to go to Chris. Between Demings and Rubio, votes going to have to go to Demings. Looking at other races on the ballot, Attorney General Aramis Ayala came on this show and killed it. And the fact that she herself, while she was the state attorney, was subject to police misconduct and being pulled over and harassed, just shows that is the type of person that we want to have in office to make sure our law enforcement is being held accountable and that we're having the proper criminal justice reforms. Versus Ashley Moody, who has just essentially jumped on, the DeSantis bandwagon, and rather being the attorney general for the people of Florida, she's been Ron DeSantis's personal culture wars prosecutor, and that is not what we need as a people.
No, guys, I'm upset that you guys managed to piss off Mark Santiago without me.
Yeah, I told him he could suck it, and he got mad.
Yeah, I was wondering what this was about.
Yeah, he said my rant was boring, so I just decided to spice it up. So
whatever.
No, that's okay. So we have a bunch of local elections we need to deal with as far as our state legislature is concerned. Yeah, it's very possible they might not take up any legislation whatsoever. I do actually hear that there is actually a bill that's being built right now and supported by MMTC to ban all hemp-derived cannabinoids. You hear that, Carlos? A $1 billion industry in the state of Florida alone that is taking care of the a lot of people in regards to filling in that market gap from the legal and the legacy market is being put on the ballot essentially. Now you're not going to see any ballot initiatives as far as cannabis is concerned. I think we're still going to see ballot some legislation that's going to go south for us. That's easy for them to do. And by the way, the only people who really can put something on the ballot right now is the legislature. Brandon's proof that right there because he decided that we should not have the Constitutional Revision Committee, and it's on the ballot. No problem. We try to put a ballot initiative on in regards to anything. They could put years of work into it, like Florida Normal did, and like the Regulate Florida people did, and never get anywhere. And they may never get anywhere, just because of the way that the legislature has set it up. They really have taken a monopolizing control over the ballot initiatives.
Here's the thing.
We need to concentrate on our legislature.
Here's the thing. All right. Here's why Florida is fucked. And you can see it in these two comments. It's two comments because he couldn't get one comment right. But dude, like this is cognitive dissonance at its best. This is Mark Santiago. This man has been working with Florida Normal. I've seen him for years trying to be on the same side as us, right? Fighting for marijuana reform. And he's just like, there's just a cognitive dissonance that I don't understand. How are you two blindly biased? There are 46 minutes to this show. You guys have not shut up the entire time. You guys have given reasons the entire time behind what you're saying. Granted, I've been in and out of the show, but I promise you that it's 47 minutes soon. Nothing but good, logical reasons of who you should vote for. And yet you guys are the ones that are blindly biased. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Here's what's blindly biased. You're not going to change cannabis in Florida if you vote Republican. I'm sorry. That's the fact. It's going to keep things stagnant. The marijuana, the Trulieve and all the MSOs are going to remain in charge of the business, right? And patients are going to continue to be screwed over, right? That's the way it is, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We've been doing this in Florida, and we've got to change it. We've got to change it. And it keeps on going.
Well, I mean, we could possibly talk to the Republican legislators and the candidates, which we've been doing. We offered everybody an open door to come on the show as far as Republicans are concerned.
They don't give a shit. Yeah, they don't.
We didn't do that well. It's getting them on. Brant came on, and Nancy Mace from South Carolina came on, and we were very grateful because they were very open-minded. They were very libertarian, if I can use that word with a small L, and basically have the people in mind. This is not to say that everybody who is Republican has the people in mind. Sometimes they have their special interests in mind, the people who fund their campaign. You yourself said, Chris, before, Republicans have a much easier time of bringing in money than the Democrats do. And that's what we've seen this last election, where it's even the governor's race. We have a governor with $100 million purse, and we have his competitor who had tens of millions, and they had to compete against each other on the same playing level. But then again, the Republicans have no problem getting money from big lobbyists who expect something in return. They expect a quid pro quo for the money that they give them, and it shows. It shows in a lot of the legislature that they push. That is not to say that all the Republicans are the same. Some people you can actually sit down and talk with them at a certain level. You have to find something that they have skin in the game with, something that rings with them, and you have to move with that. In regards to Matt Gaetz, his father was friends with somebody who needed cannabis when he was dying, and he gave it to him. And so Gates, even though he essentially has been crazy out there in D.C., he came to the realization that cannabis legislation was important. He got that from his father.
Well, let me harp on that race. Matt Gaetz is in the contested race with Rebecca Jones, who is famous for being the whistleblower on the DeSantis administration cover up COVID death numbers. And Rebecca sent back in her questionnaire. Matt did not. And I would say that when it comes to between Rebecca Jones and Matt Gaetz, based on the fact that Matt Gaetz has all these other baggage as well, with allegedly paying for teenage girls to have sex with him by Venmoing his buddy Joel Greenberg, so these girls would hang out. I mean, all in all, I'm like, that's just like, dude, that's not the guy we want in Congress. So I gotta give the vote to Jones in that race. Hands down.
Yeah, and she'd actually fill out our questionnaire too, which was kind of nice.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
Rebecca Jones is a badass, man.
Yeah. Now, I do want to address kind of this thing of Mark saying that, thinking that we're just shitting on Republicans. Let me give you a prime example of what a good Republican looks like. State Senator Kamara Barletta from Washington County in Pennsylvania is trying to currently change the DUI laws in that state because in 2019, at a checkpoint in Williamsport, a medical marijuana patient was pulled over. They asked him, did you have any illegal drugs? He says, no, I just have my medical cannabis, which is in the bed of my truck. So obviously he can't access it. Police tell him to pull over in a parking lot where they take his medical cannabis from him. They do a field sobriety test. He passed the test and he's still charged with a DUI because a blood test found trace amounts of THC in his blood. And Pennsylvania law says if you have any amount of marijuana in your system, you can be charged with a DUI, even if you're a medical marijuana patient and not impaired. So the fact that there is a state senator who's a Republican that wants to change that law, that wants to do right for the patients, those are the type of Republicans that I will support for office. So don't think that I'm just some hyper-partisan hack. I want to see people actually do something. And you know what, Mark? In the past 4 years, not a goddamn Republican has done jack shit in the Florida legislature when it comes to protecting employment for medical marijuana patients, when it comes to protecting discrimination in medical practices like getting kicked out of a nursing home or off the organ transplant list. Not a damn one of them has done anything to expand the qualifying conditions, and not a single one of them has done jack shit when it comes to actually making sure that there's affordable and safe access. So you can call me all the names you want all day. You make fun of everything. But the fact is that your people that you're supporting aren't doing anything for you and aren't doing anything for the patients. And I'm going to continue to speak up and be a voice of truth in this space, whether the MSOs like it, whether the politicians like it, and whether the advocates like it or not.
And of course, reciprocity as well.
We
have 120 million tourists who could access this and bring income to our state.
Yeah, Gary, your tourist reciprocity bill would bring in, millions of dollars, millions, and you're only charging $10 for folks to get access, to our system who have cards in other states. I think that's fantastic. We can fund our entire, Visit Florida agency with just those fees alone. I mean, God, and you're considered a hyper-partisan hack. Go figure.
Well, I can say for you for a fact, I did vote, and I did not vote straight ticket. I never vote straight ticket. I always vote the person, not the party, because there are nuances that you have to look at. Now, when it comes to judges, maybe just skip those things. I go ahead and I actually take a look and see what they've done in regards to the type of decisions they've made. I can tell you for a fact that I voted down the entire Supreme Court. I'm just saying because I happen to know exactly where their minds are at, and they are in the ether. I mean, we got knocked down from having home grow just for the word use, and they ignored the word and or when it came time to the vertical versus the other thing for Florida grown is concerned. So our Supreme Court has got to go. But I did vote for Republicans, and I voted for Democrats, and I voted for the people that I felt would be the best for Florida. And for the people inside of it, as well as the land and the ecology and everything else, because those are the things that are important to me. Now, not everybody is a single issue voter. Not everybody's going to vote strictly on what that candidate's view is on cannabis. But if it's important to you, it should be in the mix, and that's where we come from. I don't say you should go here and flip the D level or flip the R lever. No, look at the candidates themselves. Do a little bit of research, as you guys say, right?
Yeah.
And make sure it comes from a legitimate source. and vote.
I wish I could vote Republican. I like it. It goes deeper for me than just cannabis, because I mean, honestly, like I wish our system was set up in such a way that we could just conserve it and be conservative. But I mean, our system's fucked. Our system's screwed up, and it needs to be reformed. And not to get too far off the cannabis topic, but if cannabis is important to you, like said, it should be in the mix. It should be able to influence things. And the fact of the matter is that there's no Republican out there that has really ever done anything that they actually said.
Now, we had quite a few shows from the time that we started getting guests on up until the time when the election is coming up this Tuesday. But we didn't get every candidate, obviously, in. But the ones that we did come on, we did because we did our research and we saw that these people had something to say that we would want you to hear. And so as far as our endorsements are concerned, as our recommendations are concerned, take a look at some of the interviews that we have done over the last few months and listen to what they have to say. And Chris, we have a list of some of the candidates that we have had on that are for Florida legislature or for Congress that we want to pinpoint this point in time because we're getting close to the end of the show here.
Yeah, well, one thing, Carlos, if you could flash on the screen, the Normal Election Center, which is a page run by National Normal, has all the different races, different candidates. And one of the things that I took the time to do is that if the candidate came on this show, I went ahead and I filled out their report card. So you can actually find where people are. If someone's a B or an A, I'd recommend that you vote for them. In a lot of ways, the only difference between an A and a B is if you're actually have been in office and able to actually push forward any policies. So all in all, most of your first time candidates that might have Bs, the only reason they're not an A is because they actually don't have the power to vote for pro-cannabis legislation. But there's a lot of folks out there that are definitely, supportive. Some of the ones that I might want to highlight, Larissa Wright came on this show, and she's someone that's running for state house that we should definitely be voting for. Another one is Andrew Learned, who was an ally in the last legislative session when I was saying that all the Republicans shouted down our amendments to the Department of Health bill, which actually would have protected employment, would have protected from medical discrimination. It was Andrew Learned who put forward that amendment on the floor. And so, when we're looking at these races in District 69, it's Learned versus Alvarez. Vote goes to Learned. In District 68, it's McClure versus Wright. Vote goes to Wright. In District 67, between Bonanno and Driscoll, votes going to Driscoll. Looking at, in District 65, between Karen Gonzalez Pittman and Jen McDonald has to get the vote. So these are some clear races locally in the Tampa Bay area that people should be paying attention to. And they're ones that we want to make sure that the right people get into office.
And Fentress Driscoll, of course, is going to be our majority leader this year. So she will be kind of guiding the vote along those lines in a manner of a whip. Now, I tell you that Republicans, especially in the House, in the Florida House, are very top down, very whatever the leader says, go. So they basically voted the way they were told to vote, as opposed to the Democrats who go to their caucus and people make their case and they let the people decide how they want to vote from there. They never demand you absolutely follow the leader, which sometimes breaks up our vote as far as the block is concerned on the Democratic side. But at least we know where people stand. Mm-hmm. There are people who are Republicans who really do not agree with what they're voting for, but they're told they have to.
Yeah,
and that's on them. That's on them. If they feel they have to vote the leader, even if they feel that what they're doing is egregious to their own individual mores, they're not helping themselves and they're not helping us. That's what it comes down to. But definitely, those are some great races. We need to keep Cruz in office in the Senate. Who else? Because I'm sitting there flying all over the hate place right now. What other races that we want to pinpoint?
Well, there's also
for Congress.
Yeah, and then there's key congressional races.
15.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. There's also, Maxwell Frost in District 10, who came on this show, and I think that it's ideal that that's a seat that Val Demings is vacating. Having someone who is pro cannabis stepping into that seat, definitely want to have him in office. All in all, looking at, you said Alan Cohn running in that seat against. Who is it again that won that seat on the other side? Laurel Lee. That's right. Yeah. I knew there was someone. I was like, wait, there's got to be somebody who's just not right for us in that seat.
But our former Secretary of State and wife of Tom Lee, who was our senator and president of the Senate for some time. So definitely a politician's wife.
Well, also in the District 19, you got Byron Donalds running against Cindy Banyai, and Dr. Cindy came on the show and was definitely someone who espoused their support. So there is a lot of great folks running for Congress right now that we should put in there and that we should vote in that can make all the difference. Another one in a key race is Annette Tadeo down in South Florida, running against Maria Elvira Salazar. And I would say Annette Tadeo's come on the show and expressed her support in thinking about the absurdity of prohibition and how it needs to be struck down, and also her support for home grow. So I think that's someone else who we need to put in the office down there in South Florida.
And Annette also espoused that in English and in Espanol.
Indeed. Now, when it comes to Commissioner of Agriculture, this is a big one here because, the person who we were backing for Commissioner of Agriculture in the primary didn't make it through. And I have no real backing on that. I could say Wilton Simpson, as president of the Senate, had his opportunity to do something great for medical marijuana patients over the last 2 years and did jack shit. So why should I upgrade him to Commissioner of Agriculture? So that's yeah.
But because of the fact that he has name recognition and he has a lot of clout behind him, and it had a huge campaign backing him, I don't see him not winning that race. I'm not going based on polls, but based on experience as to how things are going on there. I don't see Wilton Simpson not getting that vote. We are going to have to work with him.
Yeah.
And we're willing to do that. Mr. Santiago, I can tell you right now, if there is a Republican who wants to work with us, we want to work with him. Absolutely. We want to open up the dialogue, and we want to see what we can do to shift the hearts and minds of that one particular person, whether we have to kidnap his dog to do it or whatever we will do.
Not kidding. What was that movie with Dave Chappelle and Norm Macdonald and the kidnap the lady's dog?
I know you're
kind of figuring that, but we are more than willing to work with anybody in power who can further on these things, because we have common sense ideas in regards to helping out their constituents. So we are willing to help out. That is what NORML is all about.
Well, there's one more race we haven't covered. It's CFO, Chief Financial Officer. You have the incumbent Jimmy Patronis, who has been a DeSantis hack, and then you have Adam Hattersley. I can say this much about Hattersley. When we went around on lobby days, a few years back, his office was one of the few offices that welcomed us with open arms, that was willing to sit down and listen to us. And so, in the grand scheme of things, got to give my vote to Hattersley. Now, Mark's sitting there saying that our endorsement is the kiss of death. We're not in the business of endorsing people to win. We're in the business of endorsing people who support patients, who support an open medical marijuana system, who support home grow, who support freedom, not people who take checks from Correction Corporations of America, not people who take checks from Geo Group, not people who are taking checks from the MSOs to keep the status quo. Those are not the people that we're going to support, and you're never going to see that here when it comes to us on this show.
And Mark, I will give you a Delta 8 pre-roll, because those are legal to gift, for every single person you can bring to me who has said that they did not vote for somebody because we endorsed them. And that does not include yourself.
Yeah. So, Gary, that reminds me. There's one more race. We had Amaro Lionheart from District 22 come on, who's running against Joe Gruters, who actually is the chair of the Republican Party. Whether Amaro has a hope in hell of winning, again, I'm not going to sit there and say that we want to, endorse people, just because they're going to win or lose. It's like this guy came on the show. He drove all the way from St. Pete, came on the show, told us how he feels, versus someone who is the chair of a party who has done jack shit to advance stuff in this state for medical marijuana patients. Another one in the state Senate I want to mention is Unique Ortiz, who's running to replace Jeff Brandes. Unique also came on this show. And it has advocated for us to be able to have, adult use, home grow. So I'm in favor of that. Here's another one that I never thought in a million years. You never thought you hear me say, Darryl Roussan in District 16.
What?
Yes.
Weird.
Yeah. I mean, politics makes strange bedfellows, but Darryl has actually been willing to sit down with us. He's changed his stance on medical marijuana versus Christina Palin, who has enough problematic views as it is, let alone when it comes to doing anything to support cannabis in this state. So, also,
Darryl, welcome to the show too.
Yeah, and then I want to highlight also Linda Stewart in State Senate 17, who's been an ally and been pro-cannabis in the state Senate for us. Victor Torres in District 25, who's been, pro-cannabis. There are, Senator Tina Polsky in District 30, who has been the sponsor of our employment bill, both in the House and in her time in the Senate. So there's some great people running. And again, if you want to know who they are, go to NORML, go to the Election Central on National NORML's page, and you'll be able to see where the grades are for these various politicians and who you think you can vote for.
And by the way, if ever you had a chance to talk to these people, a lot of them, even though you might not agree with their views, are actually nice folks to sit down and you'd want to have a beer with kind of situation. I mean, I actually sat down and had a very nice conversation with Spencer Roche about a lot of different things. We didn't agree with a lot of things, but there are certain things we did agree on.
As far as Gary, Gary, let me just pause you right there. See, that's my issue, is that I shouldn't be able to have to sit down and beer with you. Can I sit down and have a blunt with you? That's going to be my difference if I'm going to vote for you. Can I sit down and have a blunt with you?
And those things cost money.
Yeah, right. Oh, if only he was in a power to actually change that. Oh my God, right? What a thought.
Now, Jimmy Petronas, again, you ever have a chance to meet with him? He's a hilarious guy to talk to. He is funny as hell. He's a fun guy to be with. However, he has screwed up by not actually overseeing the insurance industry here in the state of Florida. He's supposed to be in charge of looking after the insurance industry, which is a absolute mess. And we have I doubt that people who have gotten hit by Ian are going to get their insurance claims through anytime soon, because of the way that their insurance industry is so screwed up and the way that the Citizens Insurance Group is screwed up. And that's all because of the fact that the guy who was in charge of the insurance industry didn't do his job. Plus of the fact he's never voted for clemency for anybody who's ever come in front of him, practically, maybe with one or two exceptions over the last few years. That is just his idea that if you are in jail, you belong there.
Well, also, Carlos, as you're looking to fill out your ballot, one of the things that I looked at was these amendments, and the amendment to get rid of the Constitutional Revision Commission. I would recommend that everybody vote no. The Constitutional Revision Commission is one of those few things left to us voters. When it comes up every year, they appoint people to be on the commission to actually address it and revise it. Getting rid of that, what's that leave? Just us hoping that the legislature will revise the Constitution properly when it comes up. The thing about it is that that's a holdover from the post-Civil War, because if you think about the Constitution we had after the Civil War versus our last Constitution, which we adopted in 1968, I think it's important that in the grand scheme of things, we do not have the same opinions as a society over time, and that we, the people, need to every so often take a look at our Constitution, which is a living document. I mean, even the federal Constitution has 27 amendments to it. In the original Constitution, freedom of speech didn't exist. That's the First Amendment. The original Constitution is only 4 pages. You know, you look at the amendments like, women's right to vote, or the fact that anybody has the right to vote, or the fact that slavery is illegal. These are all things that are constitutional amendments. So the fact in Florida that we have a constitutional revision commission that meets every 20 years to say, hey, let's make it happen. So I would say vote no on getting rid of the Constitutional Revision Commission. On the other things, they're really just either tax breaks or exemptions for first responders. I mean, vote your heart out. If you think nurses and cops and firefighters deserve and paramedics deserve a little bit bigger tax break on their houses, then by all means, feel free to vote for that. I don't think the other amendments are as controversial as people want to make them out to be. The legislature did a damn good job of making sure that the Supreme Court, justices they confirmed from DeSantis made sure that there were nothing getting on the ballot that was going to be in any way controversial versus previous years where we've seen things like, protecting public lands on the ballot, or restoring rights of felons on the ballot, or legalizing medical marijuana on the ballot. With the Supreme Court we have now that DeSantis is appointed, it's going to be virtually impossible. So, Gary, to your point about voting all the damn justices off and not retaining them, I support that. Vote no on retaining all the judges.
Yeah. And as far as the Constitutional Revisions Committee, I mean, I'll grant you, I might not be around for the next one in 20 years, but I can tell you for a fact, it's got to be revised, because the one that came through this last time, it was pretty much preset as to what ones were going to go through, which ones were not. I went to a lot of those meetings. I had my own proposal that basically stated that the word cannabis should be used in laws and statutes, and not the word marijuana, because of the fact that it is the actual word, is the actual name, as opposed to an idiom is concerned. We're not going to get into whether it's racist or not. That's not important. The thing is, if you look up laws right now and put in the word cannabis to find them, you'll find one group of laws, and then the Venn diagram of the ones with the word marijuana almost entirely different. So you have two sets of laws talking about the same thing because of the fact that you don't settle on one particular word, which is the correct one. And when it comes to laws, words matter. And so I put that constitutional amendment in. And
believe it or not, I agree with you, Gary.
Ignored. And I put a 3-page white paper as to why to back up my beliefs. It was good.
I agree with you. You don't have to keep justifying it. Like, I feel like you're saying all those things to me directly.
No. You be you. That's fine with me.
The truth is that, like, we argue about that. When I argue, I argue for just local colloquial speech or whatever you want to call it. But our law should represent the scientific terms. You're absolutely right.
Well, one of the things that we should be adopting is it shouldn't say marijuana, it should be cannabis. And then the other thing is rather than calling it a strain, it should be adopted as the word cultivar. So, words matter, because words in the grand scheme of things, science matters. And in the legislative process, science, rationalism, and fact are things that are important. And the fact that marijuana is illegal, that cannabis is illegal, is because of words, because Harry Anslinger was able to convince members of Congress that this dangerous marijuana is being brought in this country by Mexicans and is being smoked by black people. And when they smoke it, your young white daughter wants to have sex with black men. These are legit arguments that this man attempted to make in front of Congress and got the marijuana tax passed. And here we are over 80 years later with this same shitty system, which the Nixon administration doubled down on. So if we want to go back and say, well, what have Republicans done for marijuana? I'll tell you what they've done. They made it illegal by doubling down in the 70s. And then in the 80s with the Reagan administration, trying to poison the minds of the youth about how dangerous it is and how you're going to have people offering you free marijuana on the streets all the damn time. I'm still waiting for my free marijuana, Nancy Reagan. Where's my free marijuana, Nancy Reagan?
I think the turtles ate it.
Well, guys,
Michelangelo smoked it. That's what happened. That's why he's always eating those pizzas.
Cowabunga, dude.
All right, so if you have not voted by Tuesday morning, you're going to get up and you're going to vote no matter what the polls say, because the polls don't really matter. So don't say, well, my candidate's going to win, so I'm not going to go vote. That has happened too many times. You cannot vote from your couch unless you've already sent in that ballot. And if you haven't done that, you got to get up and you got to go to your polling place. You got to fight off all the armed guards that are going to be trying to stop you. No, that's not going to happen. but they are. You got to go and talk to those nice old folks who run the polling places, and you're going to vote and do that constitutional duty, and you will be a part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem.
And I think, for some people, I want to be clear, even the people who volunteer at the polling place aren't necessarily adept at what the laws are to vote. What you need to vote in this state is an ID card with a picture and a signature on it that identifies who you are and what your signature is. That can be a student ID, that can be a neighborhood association ID. It can even be a debit card as long as it has a picture and a signature on it. And as long as you're in line by 7 p.m. on election day, stay in line. You should be able to vote, no problem. If they give you any shit at all about not being able to vote or you're in the wrong place, say to them, I want a provisional ballot. They have, by law, have to give you one. You vote that provisional ballot, and then you essentially have about 24 to 48 hours to resolve whatever the issue is with the supervisor of elections to make sure your vote counts. But make sure and get out there and vote. It's the one right that we have as American citizens that we can exercise. It's the one thing that actually still matters in this country. So go out and get it done.
And after the voting is done, and after we've got who we got, we are going to work with those folks to move this thing forward.
Yeah.
So
I promise you guys, I'm not going to move if nothing but Republicans are voted into office. If DeSantis is still the governor, I'll stay in Florida.
And lastly, I think you should know the rumor about the fact that Democrats are going to be busing Cubans in from Havana with yellow school buses. It's not happening.
Well, look, the couple of announcements before we wrap up the show. We've been going long enough, but regardless of how the election rolls, we are still rolling in style with the Best Blunt in the Bay rolling competition, which is happening Thanksgiving weekend on Saturday, November 26th, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. It's going to be at Chillum Hemp and Mushroom Dispensary. You definitely want to be there. 1714 East 7th Avenue. Go to suncoastnormal.org now. Sign up to get your tickets. There is a limited amount of tickets for judges. Judges get to smoke what they roll up in the competition. It's going to be an awesome time. Otherwise, enter the competition. This year, we have 2 entries. You can enter as an individual, or you can put in a team entry. So get 3 friends together, enter in a team of 4, and let's have some fun with these team competitions. Also, if you just want to come and be a spectator, it's only $10, and it's free for Suncoast Normal members. So sign up, get your membership. Go to suncoastnormal.org now /membership. Sign up to become a member. You get your awesome membership card, which you can pick up there at Chillum, and also your membership pin. And in the grand scheme of things, I want to say a big thank you to Carlos for supporting our members. You get a 25% discount at Chillum as a Suncoast Normal member, as well as a free admission to the Best Blunt in the Bay rolling competition. So again, you want to be a part of that. Join us on November 26th, Saturday. Sign up now.
Okay, and with that, okay, I'll do it.
I was waiting for.
Peace out.